Good morning, students. Class 11 Science. Welcome to Environmental Science class. We have started with the second chapter, Ecology. In the last class, we have learned about the definition of ecology. We have learned the major categories of ecology. Then we have gone through the important terms like what is population, what is community. Then we have just started the topic ecosystem. Now, in today's class, we will discuss the structure of an ecosystem. Clear? So first of all, try to recall what they mean by ecosystem. Right? We have learned that ecosystem means the interactions of biotic and abiotic components. Biotic means living component and abiotic means non-living component. Okay, so in an ecosystem there will be interaction, there will be interrelationship between the biotic and the abiotic component along with their environment. Clear? So now today we will see the structure of the ecosystem, and we'll also see what are the different components that comes under biotic and abiotic. Okay, so first of all, let's go with the structure of an ecosystem. So ecosystems are the dynamic entities. Dynamic means changing. Okay, it keeps on changing seasonally, and with time it keeps on changing. So it is mainly a dynamic entity. It keeps on changing because it is mainly composed of biological community and the abiotic environment. Biological community means the living community, the living organisms, and the abiotic environment means the non-living component. Okay, because the various interrelated environmental factors, that means the abiotic factors, they will decide the composition and the structure of the ecosystem. So that's why there is a close relationship between the physical abiotic factor and the living things present there. That means when we look at the ecosystems, when we look at the habitat, all right, or in the environment, we'll find the close interaction, close relationship between the physical abiotic factor and the living things or the biotic components present over there. Okay. The physical factors will decide the type of vegetations that may exist in the geographical location. For example, the soil, the rainfall, the climatic conditions of that place. Clear? Which will decide that the particular habitat will be a forest ecosystem or a desertic ecosystem. The vegetations will be responsible for the kind of diversity present over there. Alright. And the biodiversity in turn will modify the physical environment. How? Just think of the forest ecosystem where we used to find the tall trees. Alright, the tall trees will help in transpirations and they will help to bring the rainfall. And that rainfall will also change the climatic conditions of that particular ecosystem. So we will find a close relationship between the physical abiotic factor and the living things present in that particular ecosystem. Okay. So, let us see the compositions or the structure of the natural ecosystem, which is mainly composed of two parts. The abiotic components means the non-living component, because A means no. Okay, because the word A means no. So abiotic means the non-living component, and number two is the biotic component means the living component. Bio means life. So an ecosystem is composed of two parts: the living component, which is called the biotic component, and the non-living part, which is called the abiotic component. So we'll go through the abiotic component. Clear? So abiotic component includes elements required in the material cycle. For example, nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, sulfur, etc. Okay? It includes the climate of the given region and the amount and distribution of inorganic chemicals like chlorophyll and organic matter such as protein, carbohydrate, fats, etc. So these are the composition of the abiotic component of an ecosystem. Now let's see the biotic component. Biotic component of an ecosystem includes autotrophic component. Autotrophic means the green plants. Okay, because these green plants are able to trap the solar energy and they use this solar energy for making complex food particles. You know, the process of photosynthesis, right, where the green plants containing chlorophyll will trap the solar energy, and in the presence of carbon dioxide and water they will produce the food particle, that is glucose, and this process is known as photosynthesis. Now, since green plants are able to produce their own food, they are known as autotrophs, and in an ecosystem, they are known as producers. Okay, why producers? Because they are able to produce the food particles by the help of photosynthesis. The number two component of biotic ecosystems is the heterotrophic components. Heterotrophic means the animals which are not able to prepare their food particles but are dependent on the producers, on the autotrophs for their nutrition, for the food. Clear? So therefore, all the animals, including we human beings, we are the heterotrophs. We are dependent on the producers, on the green plants, directly or indirectly, for the source of food. Clear? So these heterotrophs are further classified into primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer, and we will find the parasites and the saprophytes. We'll go through it one by one. Okay, so before going into the classification of these heterotrophs, first we will check the trophic level, because this is very, very important to understand what this trophic level means. Okay, so although we are learning class 10 about trophic level, we just see a brief lay about this trophic level. So you can see the diagram over there. You can see the trophic level, the first trophic level, the second trophic level, the third trophic level, and the fourth trophic level. Each trophic level occupies a particular organism, or it consists of particular living organisms. So in the given figure you can see that the first trophic level is occupied by the producers, by the green plant. This is the first trophic level. Okay, it's occupied by the producers. Now these producers are eaten up by the herbivore, which are called the primary consumer. Clear? So you can see that the grasshopper usually feed on the green plants. Then omnivore is there, which feeds both on plants and animals, which is called the secondary consumer, that will feeds on the primary consumer. And as last you can see over here the carnivore, which will feed upon the omnivore, which is called the tertiary consumer. So you can see the arrangement of producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer in a trophic level. So kindly remember this trophic level and the position of each organism in the trophic level. So we have got the producer, then we have got the primary consumer, then we have got secondary consumer and the tertiary consumer. So now we will go through it. Right. So first of all, primary consumer. Before that, remember the producers, which are the green plants, which will prepare the food particles. Clear? Since they're able to prepare their own food particles, they are known as producers. Then those producers are being eaten up by the herbivore, which are called the primary consumer. Okay, so all the herbivorous animals, I'm talking about herbivorous animals which will feed upon the grass, like rodents, cow, deer, okay, elephant, goat. They're all the primary consumer, all right, which will directly consume the plants. So all the herbivorous animals which will directly consume the plants or the producers are called the primary consumer. Example, I have told you that those herbivores which will feed upon the grass or on the producers. Now in case of aquatic habitat, all right, in aquatic conditions, among the aquatic animals, there are certain kind of fishes, okay, crustaceans, there are mollusca, which will survive on phytoplankton. Phyto means plant. We can see that, okay, plankton. Free floating organisms which are present on the surface of water body, which are the major producers in an ocean ecosystem. So, a certain kind of fishes like fishes, crustaceans, mollusks in an aquatic conditions which will act as the primary consumer, because these particular organisms, all right, these fishes, these crustaceans, these mollusks, they will feed upon the phytoplankton. These phytoplankton act as the producers in the ocean ecosystem. Clear? Now according to Elton 1939, herbivorous animals are the key industrial animals. Now, why did Elton mention the herbivorous animal as the key industrial animals? Because all the other animals are dependent on this primary consumer. All right, may it be secondary consumer or tertiary consumer, all the organisms are dependent on the primary consumer, because primary consumers are the one who are mainly eating the producers, which are feeding the producers, and the energy which are stored in the producers are being transferred to the primary consumers, and from the primary consumer those energies are being transferred to the secondary consumer and then to the tertiary consumer. I'll explain it to you by this diagram. So look over here. So we have got the producers. So producers, by the help of photosynthesis, will produce the food. Clear? Now that food which contains the energy will be transferred to the herbivore, the primary consumer, because when the primary consumer will feed upon the producer, the energy that is being stored in the producers in the green plants will be transferred to the primary consumer. Now primary consumer is called the key animal. Why? Because when the secondary consumer will feed upon the primary consumer, the energy from the primary consumer will go to the secondary consumer, and again from the secondary consumer the energy goes to the tertiary consumer, and hence so on. So therefore primary consumer is regarded as the key animal according to Elton. Clear? Okay. Now next one, secondary consumer. So carnivorous and omnivorous animals belong to this category. You know what is carnivorous and what is omnivorous, right? So carnivorous animals and the omnivorous animals belongs to the secondary consumer and the trophic level. All right, so these animals will predate on the herbivorous animals. That means they will feed upon the herbivorous animals and as well as plants. Example, you can see over there, we have got crow, okay, we have sparrow, and dog, then we have got snake. These are the examples of secondary consumer. Then let's see tertiary consumers, which are strictly carnivorous animals that will prey upon the carnivores, herbivores, and even the omnivorous organisms. Example, we can say like tiger, lion, okay, vultures. These are the examples of tertiary consumer. Clear? So hope it is clear for you. Where is the position of primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer? So these are the biotic components of our ecosystem. Then next one, decomposers, which will help in decomposition. There are certain bacteria, there are certain fungi will help in decomposition of dead remains of plants and animals. Okay, so decomposers will help in decomposition of dead remains of plants and animals. So these are also called transformer. Why are they known as transformer? Because they used to transform the organic compound into inorganic or simple compound. That means whenever the dead remains of plants and animals will fall upon on the ground, then the complex organic compound present on that dead remains of plants or animals will be converted into simple inorganic compound by the help of decomposers. Without decomposers, there will be no decomposition, there will be no transfer of complex organic compound into simple inorganic compound. So that's why decompositions are known as transformer, because they are helping in decomposition, they are helping in transformation of those complex organic compound into simple inorganic compound. Okay, so examples, saprophytic fungi and bacteria belongs to the decomposer. Saprophytic means which will mainly feed upon the dead remains. All right, they will take out the fluid from the dead remains of plants and animals. They will act upon the dead bodies of plants and animals and decompose to their elemental stages, and this in turn again can be used by the producers, by the plants, for their existence and to perform the process of photosynthesis. So that's why the decomposition or the decomposers play an important role in the ecosystem, as they indirectly support the producers. Now why are we saying that it will indirectly support the producers? Because we are saying that these decomposers, the saprophytic fungi and the bacteria, they are acting upon the dead remains of plants and animals. They are converting the complex organic compound into simple inorganic compound. Now those simple inorganic compound can be again utilized by the producers in the form of nutrients. So that's why these decomposers play an important role in our ecosystem. They will help in the cycling of nutrients, and therefore it will indirectly support the producers. Clear? Next one, example of food chain over here. We'll go through the food chain afterwards, but just for now look at their positions. Okay, so we have got the producers. Afterwards we'll discuss about food chain, food web, though you know the basic idea about those things. But just for now, look at the producers, the green plants. The producers are being eaten up by the primary consumer, like grasshopper. Okay, then primary consumers are being taken up by the secondary consumer. Then secondary consumers are being taken up by the tertiary consumer. Look at the example of the animals. So grasshopper is being taken up by the bluebird, and bluebird is being taken up by the snake. Okay, then at the top we have got the apex predator. Okay, then you can see the all over here which will feeds upon the snake. Clear? And when these particular organisms will be dead, let's say when the apex predator will be dead, when it die, it will go into the ground, and on the ground it will be decomposed by the help of decomposers. And when the decomposers will mainly act upon the dead remains of this all or the apex predator, then the complex organic compound present in the body of this apex predator will be changed into simple inorganic compound which will be again utilized by the producer. Okay, so this is the basic idea of our food chain or of our trophic level. Clear this one? Okay, now let's go to the next one. Parasites, which will depend upon the body of other host for their nutrients, for their food, for their shelter, we can say that. Okay, and it will not kill the host, we can say that. Clear? So there are lots of parasitic animals. Okay, like let's say there are lots of parasitic fungi, you can see over here. There are lots of parasitic bacteria, and also there are few flowering plants which are parasitic in nature. There are few plants which are discussed in biology also, right? We have got cascata also. Okay, which are the parasitic plants which will mainly feed upon the host for the food. Clear? So we have got several protozoans. Okay, we have got several nematodes, several worms which are parasitic in nature. Now, no living organisms in this world can live by itself, cannot live independently. In any habitat, one organism is dependent upon the other for its welfare. So there is interaction among the organisms. Because we are not independent. We are dependent on other organisms. Okay, we have to depend upon one another. So even with human beings, we used to influence the ecosystem, and even we are influenced by the other organisms. So even we are also interdependent in an ecosystem. So animal and plants also depend upon one another. This is very, very true. So this is known as interdependence. All right, interdependence means we are not independent, we are dependent upon one another. In any habitat, in any ecosystem, all the living organisms are not independent, they are dependent upon one another, and this is known as interdependence. So due to this delicate equilibrium, a balance is maintained in our ecosystem. If any one of the organisms will become extinct, then the whole stability, the whole equilibrium will be distorted, will be disturbed. For example, let's go back to the previous diagram, topic level. Let's say from here, if the herbivore will become extinct from our ecosystem, in this case, if there is no herbivore in this case, then the whole ecosystems will be distorted. There will be no balance, because herbivore are the one who are mainly feeding on the producers, all right, and we are helping in the transfer of energy from one tropic level to another tropic level, so that it is maintaining the balance in an ecosystem. But over here, if any one of the organisms in the tropic level will become extinct, then the whole balance of the tropic level will be disturbed, will be distorted. So all the organisms in an ecosystems are dependent upon one another. All right, they are dependent upon one another, they are interacting with one another, which is known as interdependence, and which is very, very important to maintain the delicate equilibrium or balance in our nature. Okay, for example, let's say green plants, the producer produce food with the help of abiotic components like chlorophylls, sunlight, all those things. All animals, consumers, heterotrophs, depend upon this food directly or indirectly. The dead body of plants or animals are decomposed by the decomposers, okay, like saprophytic fungi and bacteria. The decomposers convert the dead body into simple inorganic substances and return them to the soil, and this will again be utilized by the producers. Clear? So here we can say that all the living organisms are dependent upon one another. So when we look over in this case, that when the dead body are being taken up by the decomposers, all right, then the complex organic compound are being changed into simple inorganic compound. So we can see over here there is a cyclical passage of key elements such as carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen in an ecosystem between the living organism. So therefore the cyclic passage of key elements, all right, between the living organisms and the non-living organisms in an environment, it's called biogeochemical cycle. So there is a cyclical passage of these key elements in our nature. Afterwards we'll talk about the biogeochemical cycles of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen in detail. Okay, but just for now listen that a cyclical passage of these key elements between the biotic and the non-biotic components, all right, in our ecosystem, in our environment, is known as biogeochemical cycle. I'll just explain this one by taking the example of carbon cycle. So here you can see that the carbon is also present in the air in the form of carbon dioxide, all right. It's also present in the ocean, so carbon dioxide dissolved in ocean. Now what happens is that those carbon dioxides will be utilized by the producers, by the green plants, for the process of photosynthesis. So you can see over here photosynthesis in producers. So the carbon dioxide, the source of carbon, all right, will be utilized by the producers for the process of photosynthesis, and during this process it will give out oxygen. Now that oxygen will be utilized by the consumer, and the consumer will give out carbon dioxide. They will go for respiration, and carbon dioxide will be again released back into the air. So there is cyclical use of carbon, all right, or carbon dioxide between the producer and the consumer, which is again giving back it into the atmosphere. Now when the fossil fuels will be burned, all right, burning of fossil fuel, it will also release carbon into the air. Carbon dioxide dissolved in oxygen, sorry, in ocean, will be utilized by the aquatic phytoplankton for the process of photosynthesis, and in that case those consumers will again utilize it and release the carbon dioxide back into the air. So over here the carbon is being utilized, all right, but at the same time it is also being released into the air from where it is coming. So there is a cyclical passage of carbon, right? So this is known as biogeochemical cycle. Clear? So afterwards we will study in details about different biogeochemical cycle. Now next one, food chain and food web. Now what is food chain and food web? Now in an ecosystem, the autotrophs will trap the solar energy. Autotrophs means the green plants, the producers. They will trap the solar energy and use it to convert simple inorganic compound to organic compound. So this process is known as photosynthesis, that we know. Clear? Now those autotrophs, those green plants, they are consumed by the primary consumer, by the herbivore. We can say that, for example, a worm eating on a green leaf, okay, or you can say a deer feeding upon the grasses, the example of herbivore feeding on the autotrophs. Now when this happens, the organic compounds are transferred from the producer to the animal, where they will be suitably transferred to suit the animal needs, because those energy can be utilized by the animal to perform different activities. Okay, now those herbivores which were feeding upon the producers, in turn they may be eaten up by the other animal like carnivore and the omnivore. So now the energy from those primary consumers are being transferred to the next one, to the next one, or to the next animal, that is secondary consumer. So from the herbivore it was going to the primary consumer. Now primary consumer are being eaten up by the secondary consumer. So the energy from the primary consumer is going to secondary consumer. Now eventually those secondary consumer will be eaten up by the tertiary consumer. So the process of being eaten is going up. Okay, herbivore was eating the producer, herbivore in turn was being eaten by the primary, by the secondary consumer. Now this secondary consumer in turn is being eaten up by the tertiary consumer. Alright, and when those animals will be dead, they will be decomposed by the help of decomposers like fungi and bacteria. Okay, so here you can see that one organism is being eaten up by the another organisms in an ecosystem. Okay, so food chain, it's a sequence of transfer of matter and energy from organism to organism in the form of food in our ecosystem. Because over here we are saying that an organism which is feeding upon the producers in turn is being eaten up by the primaries or by the secondary consumer, which in turn is being eaten up by the tertiary consumer, and tertiary consumer in turn is being eaten up by the apex predator. So this process of eating and being eaten in an ecosystem is known as food chain, which will help in the transfer of matter and energy from organism to organism in the form of food. Clear? And the complex network of food chain, all right, the complex network or the interconnection of food chain is known as food wave. So when the food chain becomes a complex one, then we'll call it the food wave. Now, how complex is food web depends on the length of the food chain and also on the variety of consumers present in the system. Alright, because this interconnection can happen at any trophic level. Okay, so now we'll see the example of food chain and food web. Look over here. Simple food chain. Producer is being taken up by the primary consumer. Alright, rat is being taken up by the, oh, so it can be the secondary consumer. Producer is being taken up by the rabbit. Rabbit is being eaten up by the fox. Okay, this is primary consumer, secondary consumer, and fox is being eaten up by the tertiary consumer, which is lion. So producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. So energy in the primary consumer is being transferred to the primary consumer. From primary, it is being transferred to the secondary consumer, and from the secondary consumer, it is being transferred to the tertiary consumer. Another example of food chain, grass producer, the autotrophs, is being eaten up by the grasshopper, the primary consumer. Primary consumer in turn is being eaten up by the secondary consumer. That means the frog will eat the grasshopper. Now frog is being eaten up by the python or the snake. Okay. Now this python is being eaten up by the apex predator, that is eagle. So here you can see the producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and the apex predator. So by this way, the energy which is being stored in the producer is being transferred from one trophic level to another trophic level. Okay, so this is known as the food chain, the process of eating and in turn being eaten up. This is known as food chain, and the complex network of food chain is known as food web. So look over here. Producer is here. Okay. So mouse will feed upon the plants. Even the goat will feed upon the plants. Clear? Now those goats will be eaten up by the jackal. In this case, the secondary consumer. Now jackal will be eaten up by the lion. Clear? Fine. Now same thing over here. Look over here. Rabbit will feed upon the producer. Rabbit is taken up by the wildcat. Okay, wildcat is taken up by the lion. So over here, lion is the apex predator, we can say. Now, here we are saying that the mouse is also a primary consumer being taken up by the secondary consumer being taken up by the tertiary consumer, and tertiary consumer being taken up by the apex predator. But what we can say over here, the organisms, this wildcat is eating the rabbit, eating the mouse, but in turn is being eaten up by the another organism, by the lion. So here you can see that the food chain is being interconnected, right? It is being interconnected because this lion can usually feed upon this goat also. You can see this line, it can usually feed directly on the goat also, it can feed upon the jackal also, it can feed upon the wildcat also, right? So here you can see that the food chains are being interconnected with one another, and the complexity of food chain depends on the number of organisms present on each trophic level. So the complex network of food chain or the interconnection of food chain is known as food wave. Okay, so kindly go through the definition of food chain and food wave. Now next one we will go through bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Now what is bioaccumulation and what is biomagnification? Kindly remember very carefully. Okay, because there is a significant difference between these two. Bioaccumulation can be defined as the increase in concentration of pollutant from the environment to the first organisms in a food chain. Over here, kindly remember the sentence, the first organisms in a food chain. Here we are not talking about the trophic level, right? We are talking about the first organisms in the food chain. Just think of a fish. Clear? So in bioaccumulation, there will be increase in the concentration of the pollutants in an organism. The first organisms in a food chain. Usually what we do, we will try to remove those pollutants, those toxic chemicals from our body by the help of excretion. All the animals, they will try to remove those waste products, those toxic products by the help of excretion. But if the amount of those toxic substances, those pollutant consumption will be more than that of the excretion, then the level of those pollutants keeps on increasing within the body of an organism. And those increase in the concentration of pollutants, those toxic chemicals in the body of an organism, is known as bioaccumulation. Clear? Next one. Biomagnification can be defined as the increase in the concentration of a pollutant from one link in a food chain to another. That means in bioaccumulation, there will be increase in the concentration of pollutant or the toxic chemical from one trophic level to another trophic level. That means from one organism to another organism in a trophic level or in a food chain. In bioaccumulation, one more time I'm saying that in bioaccumulation there will be increase in concentration of the pollutants, the toxic chemicals only in one organism in a food chain. Just think of a fish. Clear? Those chemicals will only increase in the body of the fish. When the size of the fish will keep on increasing, when there will be development in the body of a fish, when the fish will start growing, then there will be increase in the concentration of these pollutants within the body of the fish, which is called bioaccumulation. But in biomagnification, there will be increase in the concentration of the pollutants from one trophic level to another trophic level. I will explain it to you by the help of the diagram. For example, think of this one. Okay, we have got water. Now, forget about the water. Let's think of the producers, green plants. Okay. Now, what we are doing is that, let's say we are applying DDT, dichloro, diphenyl, trichloroethane, which is called pesticides, which are mainly used to kill the pest in our agricultural field. Okay. So, what we are doing is that this particular DDT we are applying in producer. So we are applying the DDT, the insecticides, on the plant. So let's say the amount of DDT that we are applied on the producers is 1000 ppm parts per million. Okay, so the number of DDT, the concentration of the DDT in case of producers is 1000 ppm parts per million. Now when this zooplankton, alright, so we are applying it on phytoplankton. So phytoplanktons in the water body contains 1000 ppm of DDT. Now when these phytoplankton are being taken up by the zooplankton, in this case the zooplanktons are the primary consumer, phytoplanktons are the producers, and zooplankton are the primary consumer which are feeding on the phytoplankton, the producer. So when the zooplankton will feed upon the phytoplankton, then there will be increase in the concentration of DDT. So you can see over here. So from 1000 it has reached to 10,000. So the increase in the concentration of DDT is there when the zooplankton will feed upon the producer, the phytoplankton. Now when the small fish, the secondary consumer, will feed upon the zooplankton, then again you can see that increase in the concentration of DDT. Similarly, when the small fish will taken up by the larger fish, by the tertiary consumer, okay, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and is the tertiary consumer. So when the tertiary consumer will feed upon the secondary consumer, again there will be increase in the concentration of DDT. And when the apex predator, the fish eating birds, when the apex predator will feed upon the large birds, then again there will be increase in the concentration of DDT. So this particular phenomenon, the increase in the concentration of pollutant from one trophic level to another trophic level in a food chain, is known as biomagnification. Okay, but when we just think of the increase in concentration only in one organism, let's say in case of small fish, when we see the increase in concentration of pollutants in one organism in a food chain, then that is called bioaccumulation. But when we consider the entire trophic level in a food chain, and when we think of the increase in concentration of this DDT from one trophic level to another trophic level, then it is called biomagnification. Okay, so kindly go through difference between bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Okay, so in order for biomagnification to occur, listen very carefully, in order for biomagnification to occur, the pollutants must be long-lived. Listen very carefully, the pollutants must be long-lived. Number two, mobile means it must be able to move from one trophic level to anaerobic level. It must be soluble in fats and biologically active. So one more time saying that in order for biomagnification to occur, the pollutant must be long-lived, long, long, live, lived. Number two, mobile, mobile. Mobile means able to move from one tropic level to another tropic level in a food chain, soluble in fats and biologically active. If the pollutant is short lived, it will be broken down before it can become dangerous. If it is not mobile, it will stay in one place, and it is unlikely to be taken up by the other organism. If the pollutant is soluble in water, it will be excreted by the organism. Pollutants that dissolve in fats, however, will be retained for a longer period of time. If a pollutant is not biologically active, then it may biomagnify, but we really don't worry about it much since it probably won't cause any problem. So in today's class, we have learned about the structure of ecosystem. We have discussed about the biotic component and the abiotic component. In the biotic component, we have learned about autotrophs and the heterotrophs. In heterotrophs, we have learned about primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, decomposers, and parasites. Then we have learned about the food chain and the food web, and we have learned about bioaccumulation and biomagnification. So this much for today's class. Alright, we'll continue with the same chapter in the next class. Thank you.